in this lesson we'll use stencils to paint the couch cushions. So we want to paint now the rest of the pieces of our set, and so let's use an actual image that we have. And so in your project files there's an image called cloth_tile. If we click on that, you can see that it's basically just a section of cloth or upholstery, but it's actually tileable. So we can actually use this section to create an entire large scale texture. So to do this, we'll go ahead and send it over as a stencil, and you can see the stencil here. Now we use stencils in the sculpting process, but here we can use them to actually paint through our meshes. So let me turn off temporarily the cushions and the tag, and so we'll use it to paint on this piece. So I want to get it to the right scale, so I want it to be kind of fairly large, but not that large. And so I'm going to need to tile this a little bit. The first thing I'll do is I need to add a paint layer. For this paint layer, I'm going to make it a little bit larger, so we'll make this 2K. So we need a paint layer to paint on. We also want to use the projection paint tool, and this will actually allow us to paint color through the stencil. You can see now where we can see it in color. Now we also want to turn on the stencil itself, we want to turn on the tiling. And so with the stencil selected, I can go ahead and say show tiles, and I can use tiles. And what that'll do is tile this, so I can go up and down and make it whatever size that I want. And so I want it to be kind of fairly large. And so what I can do now is come into projection, and I've got white selected, a strength of 100, and I can just come in now and paint across this mesh. I'm just going to paint across the whole thing. So I'll just kind of fill this in, and it's allowing me to project through that image, that tiled image, onto our mesh. Okay. Now if I find out that it's actually, when I get in here, this is actually, I think the scale actually looks pretty good, but if you don't like it, you can always go back in, turn this off, hit S, and change the scale of this, rotate it around and get it positioned, left and right mouse buttons to do that, to get it the right scale, and then you can just paint through it again. Now we've projected this through onto this particular paint layer. So now if I wanted to do like the buttons, let's say, I could go ahead and create a new layer. This one I will make a bit lower res, and then I'll just grab the regular paintbrush, and let's get kind of a dark desaturated reddish brown kind of color. And then I could come in and paint those actual buttons. So go ahead and paint that one. Go ahead and paint that one. And this will allow me to, because I have this on different layers, if I wanted to come in and adjust the color of just the upholstery, I could do that here without affecting the color of the buttons. And vice versa, I could change the color of the buttons without affecting the upholstery. Whereas if I were to put it on a single paint layer, I wouldn't be able to do that as easily. All right, I also want to add a specular map. Okay, and so let's go ahead, and I want to fill this spec map with black. So the upholstery I don't really want to be specular. So I'll go ahead and dial the strength up. Let's flood the paint layer, and then we can go back in with our paintbrush and a little bit lighter color here. And if you wanted to use a stamp to kind of break things up a little, you can do that too, but I can come in now and make those buttons a little shinier. Same thing over here. So now the upholstery is not shiny, but the buttons are, and I can make them even a little bit more shiny if I wanted to. Just hit those in some certain areas just to give it a little bit of a shine. Okay, and there we've got kind of the back of our couch. Let's go ahead and do the same thing with the cushions. And so I'm going to hide the back and turn the cushions on. And we just want to do the same thing. And so we'll create a new paint layer. All right. And then you can also come in here and access your stencils as well. Although I don't see it in here. There it is. And then we can paint through this as well. We want to try to, let's actually bring the couch back in, just so we can make sure that the scale is close. So I think that seems pretty good. So now we can come in and, oops, I want to make sure I have projection on. Now we can come in and paint through this. Okay, and if the scale, again, is a little bit off, just hit S, scale that up a little bit, and go ahead and paint through this. So I'll just paint across the whole thing. All right. And then if you wanted to kind of isolate that, you could paint through the rest of it. Come in here and paint through this. And as it gets to those corners, you can see where it's kind of stretching. You can actually use some masking to fix that. If we go into fall off based on facing angle, you can tweak that. For us, it's not that big of a deal, so we'll leave that as is. And just paint through there. All right, kind of come to the corner, paint a little bit of that through the corner. And then on the top here, go ahead and just make sure the scale kind of matches there. And I think it's going to go this way, rather. Kind of come in and tweak that in here. So anywhere we've got that stretching. All right, so that's a look at how we can use projection to paint through photographs that we may have or things that we may have painted in other applications. And you can do the same thing on the other cushion as well. Okay, now for the tag, let's say you have a image that you've already textured. So you've already created a texture for a certain model. You just need to bring it in. In this case, so we'll turn the tag on. In this case, let's say that our tag already has a texture, but we need to actually just apply it in Mudbox. So we need to first add, or go ahead and bring this in to take a look at this. We don't actually need to add a paint layer. We can come up here and we can import a layer. So the only things we can do are create a new one and import one. In this case, we'll just import a new layer. We'll go into the images folder of our project files, and we'll choose this tag.jpg. We'll bring it in. It's going to ask us, where do we want to apply this imported texture? We'll say we just want it to go into the diffuse. All right, so we bring that in, and now we've added a texture that we've created in another application just really quickly to our model in Mudbox. So you don't have to paint from scratch every time if you already have an existing texture. All right, so spend some time using projection to come in and create your texture for the couch. Oh, one other thing that I did want to show you is, let's turn the couch back on and go into layers. And so let's say that I have this layer, which is the fiber, and I want to use that as a bump. So what I can do is duplicate the layer. So I'm just right clicking, duplicate selected. And now I want to move selected to, and I can choose any of these other channels. So I can actually move this to, let's say, the bump channel. And so now I've very quickly just taken an existing paint layer and applied it to the bump. Now I need to modify it a little bit because this is too bumpy. So I can take the strength of that bump layer down to something like that. And I can go in here with the paintbrush, and let's just get a half gray, and I can come in with no stamp and paint out the bump on the buttons. Okay, so I can come in and do that. Come over here, paint out the bump on this button. But instead of coming in and having to re-import things, you can just really quickly use an existing paint layer and apply that to any of your other channels just by going and choosing that paint layer and saying move selected to. Now keep in mind, if you want to keep the layer where it is and to create a copy, you need to duplicate it in order for that to work. Okay, so let's go ahead in the next lesson and take a look at using the pose tool. So we'll try to pose up our character a little bit, get him in position, and then we'll adjust the pose and finally finish up by just talking a little bit about map extraction. So we'll go ahead and do that next.